and good evening. Good evening. Hello, hello. I am Dr. Lakisha Lockhart. I am the Associate Professor of Christian Education at Union Presbyterian Seminary. And today I get to be a part of this amazing conversation, our Canon Conversation series, as part of the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership at Union Presbyterian Seminary with, just an amazing, brilliant, not only scholar, but musician. Just all of the things, Dr. Melanie R. Hill. And we get to discuss her new book, Colored Women Sittin on High, Womanist Sermonic Practice in Literature and Music. And I just want to say, I am ridiculously excited and have been for quite some time. So I'm just trying to keep it together for most of this time. But I want to talk about some the center. We recognize the significance of centering Black women's scholarship as viable sources and resources of theological education. This series is a webinar that's about all things womanist wisdom to support and encourage new titles, writers, and womanist ideas. And this is definitely one that we need to make sure we talk about. So I am so excited to have this conversation with you all today. And I'm excited to introduce the author, who I've just secretly been just really excited about for several weeks now. So Melanie R. Hill, PhD, is named, and I'm gonna say all the things. So y'all just sit back for a minute because she's done some amazing things. And so I'm gonna say all of them. So sit back, just take a moment, take in all of the brilliance that is Dr. Hill. So Melanie R. Hill, PhD, is named term chair Andrew W. Mellon Assistant Professor of Global Racial Justice and Assistant Professor of American Literature with specializations in African American literature, Black music performance, and womanist literature thought theology in the Department of English at Rutgers University in Newark. Hill received her PhD in English literature with 2 graduate certificates in Africana Studies and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Hill has been a reviewer of the Yale Journal of Music and Religion and published articles on the art of the sermon in Black literature, Black feminism, womanism, and the art of the sermon in African American literature, as well as the works of blues, jazz vocalist Bessie Smith, Ella Fitzgerald, under the James Baldwin Review, Religion's Journal, and Oxford University Press, respectively. In addition, Dr. Hill has held positions as Associate Research Scholar and Visiting Assistant Professor of Religion and Literature at Yale University's Institute of Sacred Music and Divinity School, respectively. Recently, Dr. Hill performed at Carnegie Hall in New York. Carnegie Hall. Anyway, and it was also invited as a keynote speaker and performing solo violinist in Paris, France, for the James Baldwin Centennial Celebration commemorating 100 years of Baldwin's legacy. That was in September 2024. She's also a keynote interviewee in the forthcoming American Girl documentary. Dr. Hill's research and pedagogical work have also been featured in Princeton University's Mellon Research Forum and the Teagle Foundation. In addition to her scholarship, Dr. Hill is a classically trained gospel soul violinist. You might be able to see some of the violins in her background. Maybe she'll talk about them for us when she starts to share. Who has performed at the White House on 2 occasions under the Obama administration, Carnegie Hall in New York, the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., the Apollo Theater, the Staples Center in Los Angeles, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, and for Pope Francis papal mass during his historic visit to the United States. All the things, just out here doing all the things. Dr. Hill has also been featured on Showtime at the Apollo, Good Day Philadelphia, Philadelphia Style Magazine, NY1, BET, TV1, and has performed for Alice Walker, Senator Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, Miss Sabrina Fulton, Dr. Janetta B. Cole, Mrs. Susan L. Turner, and opened for John Legend and Jonathan McReynolds. In collaboration with the Memorial into Unity Project, Dr. Hill performed at Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C., honoring lives lost due to the global pandemic. In honor of precious lives lost during the pandemic, Dr. Hill opened for the National Council of Churches before the sermon of Bishop Michael B. Curry, presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. Dr. Hill is grateful for God's blessings. Because clearly This is out here in these streets, and remains focused on sharing inspiration through her violin and spreading scholarship along the intersections of literature, music, and womanist theology. Her new manuscript that we get to talk about today is entitled Colored Women Sittin on High. Let me just show you this again one more time, just in case you haven't seen it yet. Womanist Sermonic Practice in Literature and Music with UNC Press. This book focuses on the ways in which Black women preachers in African-American literature, music, and in the space of pulpit encounter social injustices through sermon and song. Colored Women Sittin on High has been officially endorsed and praised by both Alice Walker, author of The Color Purple, and civil rights legend Ruby Sales. We're excited to have you, but we're going to first show your clip about your book. So we're going to show the clip, and then when we come back, we can all secretly fangirl over Dr. Hill and have some conversation. So.
For us tonight is, do you want to be healed? Do you want to become whole and live into all of your identities?
For no reason other than the fact that she was a woman meant that everything she was denied everything. She was dismissed every day.
Dehumanization, through torture, through the valley of the shadow of death, we made it. We made it through the sea that could have swallowed us. We escaped the hands of the same Pharaoh who wanted to destroy us. Oh, my sisters and my brothers, I believe somebody in this house has a reason to dance, a reason to worship, a testimony, a thanksgiving that we give and praise God for the great things.
Blackness, untamed.
I hear you, Harmony. I hear you. I hear you. Yes. Come on.
Wonderful. Welcome, Dr. Hill. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lockhart, for this wonderful introduction and this time to celebrate Black women, Black preaching women in literature, music, and in womanist theology. I feel so blessed to be here in Canon Conversations with you and with our virtual audience. And I am so happy to celebrate Colored Women Sittin on High.
Yeah, as am I. So excited. So those of you joining in, please, in the comments, let us know your name, where you're joining us from. I know I'm in Virginia. Where are you all at? I know we get folks from all over. So please join us in the chat. Let us know where you are and start thinking of those questions as we're talking. Feel free to throw them in at any time, and we'll make sure we catch those questions towards the end, after I've had my own personal questions, because I'm really excited. So let's jump in as folks are telling us where they're from and thinking about questions. Mm-hmm. So this book is, it is amazing. It is wonderful. And it covers so much and does so much work. From, like you said, literature and music and womanist theology. And you are just spanning the conversation with bringing voices in and musical things that I'm thankful for the parts in the back where you were like, here's some musical terms you should know when you're reading this. I was like, thank you, because that is not my calling. And it was like, thank you. But being also able to see actual manuscripts, like to see these in the pictures. It's just been a gift to read and to go through. And so Yolanda Wilson is joining us from Shelby, North Carolina. Hey, welcome. So I'm wondering, how did you come to write such an amazing book that encompasses so much? Please tell us the journey of Colored Women Sittin on High.
Yes. Well, I'm just so grateful to be here with you, Dr. Lockhart, in conversation and Canon Conversations. And so when I think about the journey of Colored Women Sittin on High, I think about my own theologically centered environment and background at the age of 4. So I actually grew up under 2 dynamic Black women preachers whose names are Bishop Dr. Barbara Marie Amos and the Reverend Dr. Sharon Smith Riley. In chapter 2 of the book, I really sort of augment and expand this concept of what I saw, what I witnessed as a 4-year-old child. That womanist thought, that womanist literature, that Black music surrounded me and my entire being since the age of 4. So I grew up hearing in the pulpit of sermons about social justice and gender equity at the age of 4. I remember at the age of 4, Dr. Amos talking about Dr. Renita J. Weems in her book, Just a Sister Away, and how she wanted all of the congregants to purchase the book. I remember being surrounded by not only the word of womanist thought and theology, but also the sound of womanist thought and theology. And I want to really sort of center my two pastors, because they're still my pastors to this day, because it is my home church. And the name of the church is Faith Deliverance Christian Center Incorporated in Norfolk, Virginia. And I really do consider that church, that site, as the bedrock of womanist theology and thought. It is where I saw Black women preachers as just sort of all-encompassing giant figures, Black women preachers who were resilient, who actually, really sort of came into their own spiritual authority that you actually saw in the pulpit. And not only in the pulpit, that you saw these Black women preachers in the community, right? Feeding the homeless, making sure that folks had schooling, making sure that education was the number one priority, that faith and education and the arts, right, were sort of the sort of threefold relationship, right, in terms of being a faith-centered Black woman. And so for me, since the age of 4 up into the age that I am now, that my home church has been so wonderful, and really that Dr. Amos and Dr. Riley were the inspirations behind Colored Women Sittin on High. The other sort of piece of my journey, research-wise, right, and in terms of sort of the scholarly aspect of it, is that when I was a first-year college student at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, I remember sitting in Reverend Dr. Corey D.B. Walker's class. Yes, and it was Intro to African American Studies, and we read W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk, right, which it was released in 1903. And I remembered that text all throughout my collegiate years. Fast forward to graduate school, when I entered the University of Pennsylvania, and I was in one of my literature classes because my PhD is in literature, in English literature. And I remember rereading W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk. And I remember coming across the particular chapter where he does sort of an ethnographic a search of a Black church, right, particularly in the South. And he talks about the 3 characteristics, right, of the Black church: the preacher, the music, and the frenzy. And I remember reading and gleaning all of this wonderful information that Du Bois was writing. And then I thought to myself in my room, I said, what about the women? Where were the women? And particularly, where were the Black women? Where were the Black women preachers, right? Especially in the clearing, right? Particularly in that time. And so I started to write answers to the voids that I found in literary studies regarding Black spirituality, regarding womanist theology in literary studies. I started writing answers to these things and finding answers through the books of Alice Walker, through the books of Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon and Katie's Canon, Womanism and the Soul of the Black Community. And I thought to myself, I said, I grew up in an environment with Black women preachers. And I want to write a book that honors the sermons, the sounds of Black women preachers as cultural figures, particularly within the 21st century freedom movement. And again, the preachers, Dr. Amos and Dr. Riley, under whom I grew up, were the inspirations for Colored Women Sittin on High. And also, the second sort of fold of inspirations were the Black women that I grew up around. My grandmother, both my paternal and my maternal grandmothers, Willie Mae Hill and Ella Mae Perry Whitmore, who have both transitioned and passed on, but they were praying women. I grew up surrounded by the sound of prayer. I grew up surrounded by the sound of grace, right? I grew up surrounded by the elegance, the grace, the dignity, right, of both of my grandmothers. And I grew up under the prophetic word that both of my grandmothers in their prayers spoke over me. And so when I think about my grandmothers, when I think about the Black preaching women that I grew up under at Faith Deliverance Christian Center in Norfolk, Virginia, when I think about my own mother, who is a praying woman, when I think about my Aunt Lane, who is a prophetic gift. I grew up surrounded by this. And I said, the ways in which my journey in both literature and music have carried me, what better way to write a love letter to the Black preaching women in my life than with Colored Women Sittin on High.
That is beautiful. Oh my, it's beautiful and amazing, because I didn't know you were going to say that, because one of my thoughts as I was reading this is it reads like just like outpouring of love. And I was just like, oh my goodness. I was just like, oh, this is just, and so for you to say that it's like, it was like this love letter to Black preaching women. I'm just like, oh my goodness, I feel that. I felt that energy and just the care you took in writing and talking. And like, y'all, I mean, this book, she goes, I mean, again, I'm not giving out everything because you need to get this book, but like she goes in depth with talking about like these preaching women. She's talking about them. I mean, you know, each person has you're right. And so she doesn't skimp on talking and really digging into their sermons and pulling things out. So you do justice to so many of them and so much of their work. And as I was reading it, I was just like, oh, or people that I wasn't as familiar with. I was like, oh, so thank you for that. And knowing that you're incorporating so much of that into your journey. And knowing that just helps me. I'm like, oh, it just gave me a new part of that. So thank you for that.
You know, and absolutely. And even the women that I talk about, right? And I want folks to really understand how I expand the definition of preaching.
Yes,
right?
Oh my goodness.
I expand the definition of preaching because to preach means to publicly proclaim, right? And as Black preaching women, we're publicly proclaiming truth. We're speaking truth to power. And I particularly interviewed almost nearly 40 Black women preachers across the country. And so everyone from civil rights legend Ruby Sales to Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie to Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland Toon to Dr. Leslie Callahan, Reverend Tracy Blackman. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And Reverend Dr. Danielle L. Brown, Reverend Dr. Gina Maria Stewart, and Marcia Stewart, and Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hale. I mean, all of these powerful, impactful Black preaching women who speak truth to power and whose social justice sermons really pierce the very heart of our nation, our country, and this world. And so I am an advocate. I firmly believe in the power in the social justice preaching of the social justice sermons of Black preaching women.
Yes, my goodness. And again, when you read it, it's like, I can't give it away. You need to get it, but like literally. And then she just does this, and we'll talk about it more later, but like, then she brings in the literature and then the music. Oh my goodness. It's just it's all the things at once. So I'm like trying to cover everything without detouring you. So tell us about, Colored Women Sittin on High. Tell us about the cover art, right? As well as the book title, because
Yes.
on the cover, I mean, I don't know if you all can see, I know I might have a screen on, but there's an image here, and then there's a flower. And I mean, so just tell us what was the thought around the image, but also the title, because, you know, there's a lot there. So
you know, I am very, very, I'm extremely proud of this book's title. I knew that this book could not be released without the cover art, without me really loving the cover art and enjoying it, because I knew I am a perfectionist. So I knew that if I loved the cover art, that it would really appeal to millions and millions of people. And so particularly with the cover art, right? We have butterflies, we have lilies, right? Or gardenias, right? We have flowers, we have the actual Black preaching woman, the profile, right, of a Black preaching woman. But more particularly with the title of the book, Colored Women Sittin on High. So Colored Women Sittin on High comes from Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, published in 1937. Zora Neale Hurston wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God in 1936 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And during my fellowship year at Yale, I had a chance to go to the Beinecke Library, look at Hurston's archive, and actually include images, holograph images of her own writing of Their Eyes Were Watching God. So everyone, audience members, are able to actually see Hurston's own manuscript writing, how she wrote this book in my book, and they're able to see images of her script. And so when I think about colored women, there it is, yes. when I think about Colored Women Sittin on High, there's a passage on page 16 in Their Eyes Were Watching God. And this is a conversation between both Nanny and Janie, right? Janie is the protagonist in the book, and Nanny as Janie's grandmother. And I think sort of about the grandmother prophetic, if you will, in this book. And so Nanny says to her granddaughter, she says, "I even hated the way you was born, but all the same, I said, thank God, I got another chance. I wanted to preach a great sermon about colored women sitting on high, but there wasn't no pulpit for me. Freedom found me with a baby daughter in my arms. So I said I'd take a broom and a cook pot and throw up a highway through the wilderness for her. She would expound what I felt. But somehow she got lost off of the highway. And next thing I knowed, here you was in the world. So whilst I was tending you of nights, I said I'd save the text for you. I've been waiting a long time, Janie, but nothing I've been through ain't too much if you just take a stand on high ground like I dreamed." So I wanted to preach a great sermon about colored women sitting on high is Nanny's dream for Janie, right? It was her dream for herself and also her dream for Janie's mother, right? But as Nanny says, that Janie sort of got lost off of the highway, and next thing that Nanny knew, that she had to take care of her granddaughter herself. And so she said, "The dream is for you, Janie. This word is for you. This prophecy is for you. This dream of me preaching a great sermon about Black women, about colored women sitting on high, that this dream is for you." And so I am grateful for the words of Zora Neale Hurston. I'm grateful for out the sort of resurrecting power of Alice Walker, really bringing the genius of the South, as she calls Zora Neale Hurston, back to the forefront of our literary minds. And now, not even our literary minds, but our musicological and womanist theological minds. And so that's really where the title of the book comes from. It is an analysis of Black women preachers as cultural figures in social justice realms, within the pulpit and without. But it is also an analysis of the expansion of what it means to preach, right? What it means to preach through literature, what it means for Black women to preach and proclaim truth through song, in soul music and gospel music, and what it means for Black women to preach truth through a womanist theological lens. And so all three discourses, Black literature, Black music performance, and womanist theology, are all covered within this book.
They are, and they're done well and beautifully.
Yeah.
Yolanda Wilson said, beautiful cover.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, because I'm an educator. I consider myself an educator and a practical theologian. And right. And so I don't consider myself a preacher. And yet what I appreciate so much about your work and this expansion of this definition of what it is realizing, like, proclamation shows up and it moves in different forms. As you talk about, like, it's the voice, it's the tone, it's the embodied expressions, it's the all of this, and like you address so much of that. And so I'm so grateful for like this, as you call it, this sermonic space or clearing space, right? As we're talking about Toni, you talk about Toni Morrison and the work of, like, the clearing and what it does. So I'm grateful for that. And you talk about it so well. You just read Zora Neale Hurston, and so I'm curious about your move between literature, music, and theology. It's not just one, it's not just two. You're doing all three. You're doing the work of all three and weaving them together so beautifully, literally in the same chapter that, you might be talking about Reverend Dr. Amos, or you're also talking about, James Baldwin, and then you might also be throwing in an artist, like, specifically, I know there was a chapter where you talk about, Aretha Franklin and Lauryn Hill and Jill Scott. Shout out to Jill. She has a new album coming out. But right. But what is and so I'm curious, what drew you to, or maybe it was just you were already doing it and now you're writing about it, but to read sermons and all of this work and weave them together so beautifully? Kind of what led you to that move?
Yeah. I'm grateful for that question, Dr. Lockhart. And I refer to the latter part of what you said, that I was already doing it and I wanted to write about it. That writing and literature to me, since a very young age, since third grade, have come very naturally. I've always loved books. I've always loved music. And my sort of faith-centered environment really helped me mold and shape the contours of this particular book. And so when I think about all three discourses, for the first chapter, I talk about left-handed sermons in a right-handed world, and Polly Murray and her contributions to not only social justice, but the art of the sermon in Black literature. And then in chapter 2, I talk about a womanist vibe of the blues sensibility, disrupting heaven through sermon and song, and their eyes are watching God. And then the next chapter, I talk about James Baldwin's illustration of Black women preachers in the Amen corner and Just Above My Head. And then chapter 4 is really the sort of symphonic illustration of the ways in which Black women preachers deliver the word in both sermon and song. As a musician, I am a classically trained gospel soul violinist. And so I read music. But I also play by ear as well. So when I hear particular sounds, there are moments where, and I sort of share this too, that I hear particular notes in sounds. So for example, when I was in high school, when the bell would ring, I would hear an F natural. The bell, the sound of the bell was an F natural, and I couldn't get it out of my head. There were moments when I couldn't go to sleep because music was always in my head. And so with this book, I wanted to center and democratize music, right, as a theoretical framework around how, because music is universal, right, how, and it's an art, how we can understand the sermon in African-American literature, how James Baldwin through sound mentions the art of the sermon in African-American literature, and also the ways in which we we sort of hear the sermonic in the music of Jill Scott, in the poetry, the blues sounding poetry of Philadelphia-based poetess, prophetic poetess Ursula Rucker, the way in which we hear prophecy in my favorite artist, Ms. Lauryn Hill, and the way that we think about sound and the sermon and gospel music with Shirley Caesar and Sister Rosetta Tharpe. I wanted to bring all of that together within this volume because I knew that if I separated each sort of discourse, it would fragment the research. And I did not want to fragment this scholarly research. I wanted to bring all of the frameworks under one lens, where I talk about the social justice work of Black preaching women, but that I also expand this definition of really, what it means to actually preach. What does James Baldwin talk about when he talks about Margaret Alexander gaining the keys to the kingdom? Love, right? What does he talk about when he writes about the sermonic journey of Julia in his last novel in 1979, Just Above My Head? And particularly in that novel, in James Baldwin's Just Above My Head 1979 novel, that Arthur Montana is usually the most talked about figure, right? The protagonist as a gospel singer in the book. But I read the book and the text and I thought, Julia is such a powerful figure. There's a reason why Baldwin placed Julia Miller and Julia's sermon, her journey, within Just Above My Head. And at the very end of the novel, not to spoil it for anyone, but I really encourage our audience to read James Baldwin's 1979 novel, Just Above My Head, because towards the end, when Julia is sort of going through this change and transformation of herself, she says, sometimes now that I'm out of the pulpit, I feel more in the pulpit than I did when I was preaching. In other words, that more liberation, more power, more transformation, more self-actualization she found for herself outside of the confines of the pulpit. And so I really wanted to bring that expansion of thought to this book so that folks would really understand and know what it means when we listen to a song by Lauryn Hill on her MTV Unplugged album 2.0, right, in 2002, or when we listen to the Miseducation of Ms. Lauryn Hill, or when we look at videos of Sister Rosetta Tharpe playing in France and in Germany, right? And so I really wanted to bring the expansion of thought of how we see Black women in the arts, Black women in literature, how we see and analyze Black women writers, but most importantly, the illustration of Black preaching women in all three of these forms.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just some comments. They were saying, oh, it's powerful and amazing. So, you're just engaging. And so I'm wondering, so in doing all of this work and weaving these things together, again, as you do in the chapters, I mean, again, so beautifully. And so even if you all haven't read some of the text that she's mentioning or the music, like she talks about it in there. So don't feel like you can't read it because you don't have these. She gives you all the context. And you were talking about like how you hear notes. That not my gift, but I'm glad that you have this gift because you're wonderful and talented. But I appreciated how in your text you're like, A flat, F this. And so for me, I'm like going to my phone and I'm like, play an F flat, right? Like, I want to hear what you hear. And so It was really beautiful because it helped me like feel like that, like the dun. And I was like, oh, I know what she's talking about. So it was like, I was engaging with that because you were giving me the notes. I'm like, oh, like that's what she's hearing when and so again, y'all just have to get the book. Like I'm trying to say it without saying it. It was so good. So as you're thinking about this, as you're thinking about the literature and these Black women preachers, I'm wondering, what did you have to do, like methodologically, with this work to honor Black women preachers as both these theological, thinkers and theologians that are thinking so deeply, as well as sonic artists, right? As you call them, and rather than just what they normally are as like, illustrations in someone else's theory or someone else's work, but that's not at all how you're framing them. So what did you have to do like differently in this book to highlight that?
Yes. And that's a wonderful question. So ethnographic research was the essential key component to me writing this book. I am very grateful for the nearly 40 Black women preachers that I interviewed and whose interviews that I have, and whose transcriptions that I have, the ways in which their thoughts helped me to process, sort of particular spheres of thinking. For this book, also immersed myself within womanist thought and within womanist theology. So I studied the works of the matriarchs of womanist theology, right? So I immersed myself in womanist thought and in literature and how it came to be, particularly with first the literature and womanist thought process of Alice Walker. So I first started with In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, womanist prose, and because my degree is in literature, that I started there. And because my expertise is also in womanist theology and music, I moved forward into the ways in which what other Black women theologians, what other Black women writers were thinking about this intersection of literature and religion at the same time. The ways in which they were thinking about Black women writers like Zora Neale Hurston and others. And I moved to our wonderful and beloved Reverend Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon. And her book, Katie's Canon, Womanism and the Soul of the Black Community, was what I like to call my womanist Bible. That the ways in which she expounded upon womanist ethics critique and the ways in which she expounded upon the works of particular Black women writers and how important it was to not only center but democratize the work of Black women writers in literature and how we can think about it theologically. Dr. Cannon was my inspiration for that. Because I am a scholar who grew up around, I have about 1,000 books right now in this office. And because I grew up around books and literature, and I loved thinking and immersing myself in Black history, memory, thought, expressive culture, I realized that this book is not only a scholarly research component of my studies, but it was also a reflection of who I am as both scholar and artist, and the ways in which I preach through my gospel violin, the ways in which the words that I literally am singing in my spirit, the ways in which those words are embodied on the bow hairs of and the strings and like the arc of the bow. And I thought about all of those things. And so it really helped me methodologically to first be both scholar and artist, and then immerse myself within womanist literature, and then think about the ways in which the matriarchs of womanist theology, Jacqueline Grant, Emily Towns, and contemporary thinkers, not only matriarchs, but the contemporary thinkers as well, and Dolores Williams and Dr. Weems, the ways in which our and Stacey Floyd Thomas, Dr. Stacey Floyd Thomas, the ways in which our contemporary thinkers as well are thinking about womanist theology. Those are the sort of ideas and the ways in which I mapped out my sort of research regarding this book. It was very important for me to center womanist thought first. It was very important for me to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm looking at our time, and I want to make sure viewers get a chance to take in questions, but I have like so many more. So I'm gonna do one more question, and then I'm gonna. So if you all in the chat have questions, please go ahead and start putting them in the comments, so I can start preparing to ask some of your questions. And if you don't have them, don't worry, I still have more, and I'm happy to ask my questions. But while you all are putting your questions in the chat, I'm trying to choose which one I want to give right now. But I'll go with this one. How does Womanist Sermonic Practice reimagine authority in the pulpit and beyond, especially as we know in traditions where Black women's preaching is often marginalized, it's often policed, it's often kind of pushed to the side. So for you, how does what you are talking about, this Womanist Sermonic Practice, reimagine what that means and what that looks like?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, Black women preachers are at the center of what I term womanist sermonic practice. It's a transdisciplinary, and what I mean by transdisciplinary is that it covers all three discursive frameworks: literature, music, and womanist theology. That it is a transdisciplinary framework with womanist thought that examines Black women preachers as cultural figures in literature, music, and in religion. In womanist sermonic practice, it also encompasses what I like to call a womanist sermonic aesthetic that uses music as an analytical tool that displays the cultural and social impact of Black preaching women's sermons in the 21st century freedom movement. And so with using history, both history and memory, womanist sermonic practice looks through both Black literary and musicological lenses to discover the both inward and outward, right, power of womanist preachers' sermons. And it is important to note, and I'm going to read a short passage too after this, but it's important to note that womanist sermonic practice also counters the deeply entrenched hegemonic structures of racism, sexism, white supremacy, gender phobia, homophobia, and classism. And womanist sermonic practice also uses the sermon as a site of knowledge, as a site of epistemology. So that is the overarching framework of this book. When I think about Black women preachers in all three realms of discourse, literature, music, and theology, I term womanist sermonic practice. In the preface of my book, there's a section that I call Triptych: Preaching, Prayer, Protest. And these are the sort of the first words, and I think it'll give the audience a clue in terms of how I open this book and what I talk about expansively throughout. I think we're going to be arrested tomorrow. A bold assertion colored slightly with trepidation. These were the words I heard standing a few feet away from social justice advocate and now Chief Operating Officer for the National Council of Churches, Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland Toon. With the warmth of spring hovering and the heat of the summer quickly approaching, Copeland Toon was speaking to a colleague in hushed but assured tones after a plenary session in April 2019 for the Troubling the Waters for the Healing of the World gathering for global peace with justice in Washington, D.C. Uttered in preparing herself and others for what could possibly occur at the U.S. Capitol the next morning, those 8 words have resonated with me for years. And especially with what we are witnessing now, particularly within this country, it is the work of womanists who call out the name of Renee Nicole Good. It is the work of womanists who call out the names of Sandra Bland, Tatiana Jefferson, Breonna Taylor. It is the work of womanists, of womanist preachers who write and preach messages of the freedom movement that wholly evoke and affect change. And so it wasn't just enough for me to name everybody who can expansively preach beyond the pulpit or expansively proclaim, right, beyond the brick and mortar of the church. It was more of me studying the social justice efficacy of Black preaching women's words, sermons, and song. And to me, that just encompassed all of those three realms of conversation: literature, music, and womanist theology.
Wow, thank you. My goodness. Just hear, I mean, I read your words and I'm like, yeah, like hearing them from your voice.
Yes.
Like I've seen that in the app. I'm you to sue me. No, but thank you for that. Thank you for that. And we have a question from at Robin Joins 9644. Hey Robin, thank you for joining us. And she Robin asks, can you talk about your thoughts on the prophetic and how do you weave prophetic thought in this work?
Yes. Thank you so much, Robin, for your question. And so there's a section in the book where I talk about the art of the sermon in African American literature and the prophetic in African American literature. And the ways in which we think about the works of Alice Walker, Zora Neale Hurston, Gloria Naylor, Toni Morrison, that and more, that we think about Black women writers, particularly within this prophetic tradition. And when we think about how Black women writers write about the past, they write about the past, they write about the present, but then they also proclaim about the future, right? That is what we are succinctly talking about when we're talking about the prophetic tradition within Black literary studies. And, particularly when we're talking about the prophetic tradition within musicological studies, within ethnomusicological studies, when we're thinking about the works of Jill Scott, of Lauryn Hill, that those of Ursula Rucker, that those artists fall within the prophetic tradition. And so, namely, Colored Women Sittin on High is the site of the prophetic. It's the title and the site of the prophetic within the Black literary tradition, right? What do we mean when we're talking about Black women, when we're talking about colored women sitting on high, right? That in itself is a prophetic proclamation. And so when we think about particular challenges that Black women face, not only within the church, but everywhere else, that this book speaks to those challenges, right? That this book, through the power, through the significance, the profundity of Black women's words, that this book sort of answers why it is important to delve into the prophetic. I am a huge advocate and proponent for talking about spirituality in African American literature, for talking about the prophetic in African American literature, because you cannot talk about the works of Toni Morrison, you cannot talk about the works of Gloria Naylor or the works of Hurston or the works of so many, or the works of Alice Walker, without talking about what it means for these Black women to prophesy not only over themselves, but also their communities. What does it mean when we look at a Baby Suggs Holy from Toni Morrison's 1987 novel, Beloved? What does it mean when Baby Suggs Holy is telling her community in the clearing to love their flesh, right? To love their bodies, to love themselves, because yonder they don't love your flesh, but you love it. You touch your flesh. You understand and you love who you are created to be, right? That's one of the prime examples. Baby Suggs' Holy Sermon is one of the prime examples in African American literature of the prophetic tradition. And even in 2026, that Baby Suggs' Holy Sermon still resonates and speaks to us in beautifully divine ways for us as Black folks, for us as people of color, to love ourselves, to love how we were created, to love the gifts and talents that God has blessed us with, and to use them and fulfill purpose in them for the greater good of our communities, the nation, and the world. So I am a huge advocate and proponent of talking about the importance of the prophetic in the Black literary tradition.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Robin, for your question. Again, please feel free if you have other questions in the chat, please put them in the chat. And I'm going to ask another question while we're waiting for a question to come in. So on page 73, you write, "A preacher's role is to inhabit a dead space with her voice and body to reinvigorate or revitalize said space, using her words to resurrect and bring power to dry bones." And I mean, you talk about this again. You use Hurston's work. You talk about Janie. You talk about. I mean, you use so much of this, and so I'm curious. You talked about in the beginning how you felt like this was a love letter, and so I'm curious. Do you feel you've done that yourself with this book? Do you see this work as one of your clearings, as your sermonic space as well?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that question, Dr. Lockhart. I do see Colored Women Sittin on High as my own clearing. I do. I see it as a sort of as a site, as a text for great communal presence. I see it as a text that makes people think about expanding their conventional ways of thinking. I see it as a text that makes people revision the text, right? What do we mean when we're talking about blues women and creativity, or Black women writers and the sacred relation and the sort of sacredness of the sermonic, right? What do we mean when we're talking about womanist musicology, right? And the ways in which we think about Black women preaching through the microphone, Black women artists like Fantasia, and so many others that embody the sermonic in their performances. As both scholar and artist, I see myself in a lot of these women. I play violin. I'm a gospel violinist, and the way in which I see myself as a colored woman sitting on high with my violin, preaching truth to power through my strings, and the truth that really comes up out of the depths of who I am, the love, the grace, the respect that I have for us as Black women, that comes out through my music. And I see, really, yes, I see my book as a clearing, and then I also see my preaching through my violin as my clearing as well. I feel like I have a lot of clearings that I actually that I feel as though I humbly represent, and I feel as though my life is meant for more clearings. I feel as though my life is meant for more clearings. There's something that I wrote in my notes that I wrote when I first wrote this book. It was on the UNC Press blog. And I said that Black literature and music saved my life because of the theologically centered environment that I came from. The violin became my voice. The pen became my literary sword. And womanist preaching became my lifeline. Womanist preaching is my lifeline. My violin is my voice and my pen is my literary sword. And so when you think about proclaiming truth, you're proclaiming truth through the strings, right? That's my clearing. You're proclaiming truth through my pen, which is my literary sword, right? To sort of borrow Intersect Shange's, my pen is a machete, right? Lost in language and sound. I consider myself lost in language and sound, always lost in language and sound, lost in literature and music, and continually making purpose-filled clearings for not only myself, but others. The work that I do is not for me, it is for the community, is for the glory of God, and it is for the community, and it is for the nation and the world. And that to me is the legacy of Dr. Cannon. That is her legacy. That the work, that to do the work that your soul must have. My soul must have the violin. It must. It must. My soul must have literature and books. It must. And my soul must have womanist preaching flowing through my veins, becoming my lifeline for eternity. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. That is why I wrote this book. It's not just another check on the research box for me. It's not. Not this. It's not. And I don't think any of my work will ever be, because my work is me. It's who I am. But this Colored Women Sittin on High is it's me. It's a part of me. It's not even a part. It is me. It is me. And so I really echo the words of Dr. Cannon: to do the work your soul must have. That is the prophecy that she released. And very quickly, I want to say too, that in the beginning of the conversation, I forgot to acknowledge that I really wanted to acknowledge Reverend Dr. Katie Geneva's kindness, Reverend Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon's kindness towards me in 2018, when I met her in person for the very first time. And I remember standing with her in the elevator, and before the final prose of this book was even completed, she said, "I cannot wait until your book comes out." That's the prophetic tradition right there, right? That she said, "I cannot wait until your book comes out." And just the way that she treated me with such kindness and just beauty and divinity, I'm just so grateful for Reverend Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon, and her spirit lives on in all of us. Her work resonates and will resonate for generations to come. She is Colored Women Sittin on High.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like, number one, yes, I absolutely agree. I'm over here just rubbing it in. I'm just like, yes. All the things. And I'm looking at our time, and I know we have to get ready to head out. But I just want to honor just the violins that are behind you. I've been again, as you're talking and as you're saying that this is part of what your soul must have, I'm looking at this beautiful, funky, amazing pink, black violin, and I'm also looking at the one at the top, and I'm just like, oh, that's so. It's just so fitting, right? I'm feeling it, and I'm seeing you, and I'm just so grateful. And I'm wondering, I'm looking at our time, and so I wanted to end with your poem at the end of the book, if that's okay. Now, would you I feel like these are your words, so I want to know, are you okay reading it to us?
Oh, okay. Yes, I would love to read. I would love to read it.
I want you to know, she infuses quotes, poems all throughout this book, and she gives us the gift of her poem at the end of the book. So y'all are in for a treat, and then after that we'll wrap up. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Lockhart. And also for our virtual audience too, in the book there are images and pictures that I included of iconic Black preaching women. Our beloved, the late Reverend Dr. Cecilia Williams Bryant is right here in, I don't know, my finger is not, but you will see her, as well as Dr. Renita J. Weems, Reverend Joanne Jennings, and Dr. Amos and Dr. Riley. I've included many images of a symposium that I curated at Yale in 2022 to honor Black preaching women. And so you'll see that in the book. But here for the coda, when the women preach. When the women preach, we dream forward. When the women preach, work is love made visible. When the women preach, they walk in rhythm and move in song. When the women preach, there's a new world coming. When the women preach, a world of radicalized formation and revelation that honors the music of our language is created. When the women preach, language is rich in melody, prose, and verse, filled with purpose, liberation, inclusivity, justice, righteousness, and heritage. When the women preach, we feel the breath of our ancestors exhaling upon dry bones. Black futures are woven together with words through song and sermon when the women preach. When the women preach, they sing blue notes of sorrow, turning them into grace notes of song. When the women preach, they preach as poetic prophet Intersect Shange exhorts a righteous gospel. When the women preach, they call for collective unity through song. When the women preach, we hear the vocal reverberations of our ancestors, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Julia A.J. Foote, Mariah Stewart, Polly Murray, and Baby Suggs Holy. When the women preach, womanist spaces of justice, clarity, and love become their offerings. When the women preach, they shift from B-flat minor blues to grace notes in G major. When the women preach, they become blue note womanist preachers. When the women preach, they sing our sighs and preach our possibilities. When the women preach.
And we're going to add Dr. Melanie R. Hill to that list of women and say thank you for your time, for your witness, for your Womanist Sermonic Practice, for your clearing spaces, the many ones that you have and that you're gifting to the world. As you mentioned, I'm sure there'll be many more clearings that you have, and I'm just excited to have met you, to have had a conversation with you, and that you have gifted the world with this and your gifts in so many other ways of your musical talent. So thank you all. Amen and ashe to all the things. But thank you all. Have an amazing evening, amazing night, and blessings on all that is to come your way, Dr. Hill. It was a pleasure. Thank you all. Have an amazing night.
Heart. Thank you. Blessings to you all. Yes, get Colored Women Sittin on High, available everywhere where books are sold.
Good night.